9:37. I was actually thinking maybe next week we could record our meditation.
Yeah.
Not that anybody wants to fucking watch us sit here and do nothing, but I'm almost like, that would kind of force me to. I wonder if I would sit stiller if I know I'm being observed.
Wow.
Right? Interesting. Compose for... So there's not too much to go over ahead of time. A couple little things. I'm sure we'll make it last half an hour. And then I got a long list of quotes. I'm not going to be able to read this shit.
Because it's in your own handwriting?
Yeah. We definitely need to do an episode about sponsorship, too. The more I think about that, the more I'm like, yeah, that's a necessity. I feel like I put out the call weeks ago when we did the Recovery Dharma episode. That like, hey, we need people from other fellowships, and what are you into? And like, I was trying to, I didn't just want to say, oh, cool, you're in that fellowship, come on. I wanted to like have some interaction and be like, hey, you know, is our conversation flowing? Do you sound intelligent? And then I just feel like all those people fell off the face of the earth. I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah, well, they were most of them on Twitter, right?
Yeah, but I went back and looked, and there was only actually, it was way less than I thought it was, comments.
Yeah, felt like more.
Felt like there was like 20 comments. There was like 5. And even then, like the one guy I reached out to about the Marijuana Anonymous or whatever, and he never got back to me. And I'm like, well, I need to find somebody to schedule over the next 2 Sundays.
He's smoking weed, ain't good time for that shit.
Right?
I was motivated to do these meetings, but it just didn't ever happen.
I was gonna hit a meeting, but then I got high. Oh, Lord. All right. Got that. Why can't I find this Facebook thing? I guess that's as good as it gets. I was surprised nobody commented on the relationship thing. Like, I posed it as a question, like, does people have opinions about whether it's better to date in recovery, out of it? I'm like, nobody really had much to say about it.
I have a general, and it's my general feeling with that shit, too, is like, I'm done engaging with Facebook.
Why is that? Just curious.
I just don't feel like it's healthy or productive. You know, it just really doesn't feel like it.
A lot of it? Probably not. Probably not. We're going to look so fancy in here when we get our other microphones. Oh, we're already recording. 9:37. Okay. All right. I don't know. You ready to start?
Yeah.
I don't have a whole lot else to figure out. I'm just going to talk about step 7. Been waiting forever to hear about this. Oh, I got a coffee. I wonder if me sipping my coffee is gonna... Oh well, we'll try it. Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to Recovery Sort Of. I'm Jason. I'm a guy in long-term recovery.
My name's Billy. I'm also a person in long-term recovery.
And today we finally get to hear the incredible, magical insight into step 7 from, not God removing these defects of character, which I'm dying to hear, right? Because I really am. I was thinking about this the other day, and I thought it's almost more magical to me to think of this in a different way. Like, people would say, like, God sounds like magic and crazy, flying spaghetti monster sounds ludicrous. And I was like, I actually think it sounds more flying spaghetti monster-ish to not have God remove these. And I don't know. It's so interesting. So we will get to that. That is the main purpose of today. Step 7. Definitely excited about that. Just to cover some things before that. We had a little bit of feedback about dating. It was interesting. I posed a question. I feel like I'm leaning too close into the mic here. I'm trying to chill. I get a little excited. I posed a question all over the place. Is it easier or better, or are there more benefits to having a relationship with someone also in your program or outside of recovery altogether? And I guess that leaves room for a third option of in recovery, but in a different program, which is maybe that's the best of both worlds. I don't know. We don't know that one. But there was very little response. And so the only hypothesis I have about that is that everybody has a partner in recovery and they didn't want them to see their response. That they thought it was better to have them outside of recovery. So I don't know. Do you have any idea why that could be?
Well, I mean, immediately when I mentioned to my wife we were doing this podcast about relationships, she's like, oh my gosh, I can't listen to it. You know what I mean? It's going to start a fight. And then you had said, it brought up some stuff with your wife, some issues. And I think, just me personally, I think that could be part of it. You know what I mean? It's like people just don't want to put their shit out there because it, even to be honest and say, like, yeah, it's really difficult in whatever situation you're in, is just opening up the potential for
it
problems.
and for the benefit of the doubt, just to let y'all know, since she doesn't always have a voice on here, my wife did completely disagree with my assessment and said that even as a person outside of recovery, she has attempted to help me stay focused on recovery and be my eyes and ears and call me out on shit, which I was telling Billy was a benefit to having, someone in recovery. And she said she tried that, and I told her I didn't want to hear that bullshit. So there it is.
But you still tell them that when they're in recovery, too. It doesn't matter.
Right. I'm like, yeah, but I don't know.
Shut up. I know what I need to do. I don't need to hear it from you.
Exactly. So, it's all a matter of where we're looking at it from. But, yeah, that's what I figured. People don't want to put their stuff out there with their partner, having the ability to see that. We did get a couple of responses. Our buddy Kirsten, she said dating an earth person can be exhausting if you struggle to feel or question whether they completely understand what you go through. And I do think that is one thing that's a little different, right? If I had to say what's the greatest downfall or risk of dating someone in recovery, it would be, well, they can fucking relapse and ruin my life, right? And if I had to say what's the greatest downfall of dating someone outside of recovery, it's that a lot of them truly can't grasp what it's like to not be able to fucking stop and to want to do something hourly that destroys your life. Like, while I think there's a lot of similarities between us and non-addicts, right, in a lot of ways, and I'm going to get to one of them in a second too, right, but that's one of them that's just, it's a hard concept to grasp if you haven't had that calling inside of you to just wreck your fucking life.
Yeah, and I would go through this conversation with my parents when I was in my early 20s and getting in trouble with drugs and stuff, and they would say, like, why don't you just stop? Right. And there were two significant things to that. One, I didn't know why I couldn't. You know what I mean? I didn't have a good answer for, like, I don't know. I just want to get high. Like, I just love it. And then I would try to say this to my mom all the time. Like, she smoked cigarettes. And I would say, it's just like cigarettes. Like, why don't you stop? It's not healthy. It's not good for you. It's killing you. But yet you do it anyway. And she would just be like, well, that's different. And it was so easy to dismiss that.
People do not want to hear that shit when you put it back on them. And
no.
Especially if they feel their life's a little more manageable, right? Like, maybe they can get up and go to work every day, and you try to call them out and say, it's exactly like your shopping habit as you're going in debt, or it's exactly like the way you eat as you're, becoming obese. And they're like, oh, fuck you, right? Like, I don't need to hear your bullshit. I go to work every day, you lazy bum. And it's like, maybe you don't want to see it, but it is very much like that.
I think to some level, everyone has some sort of compulsion or self-obsessive type behaviors or things that they get into. And for some people, they just they don't, one, let it get to the point where it's such an extreme it's causing chaos in their life. For some people it's healthy eating or the gym, or they get really into that and they become kind of obsessive, almost regimented, in that stuff. And it's healthy and it's good and it works out fine. I think for addicts, though, the difference is we are repeatedly engaging in behavior that is killing us. Like we can almost see that it's killing us and wrecking our lives, but we can't stop.
Yeah. So Kirsten went on to say, it's probably pros and cons to both, which is obviously the ultimate answer that I think either of us would ever come up with. Another guy, Jay, said that he said there's no perfect, but it might make it easier to have somebody inside recovery just so they could understand. And so that turned into a little conversation. Caroline had some input that she's only had serious relationships with others in recovery. And she just can't imagine, because recovery is such a huge portion of her life, having someone that wasn't also into that at the same time. And that's where I think it gets tricky when we talk about either someone in our program or someone who's, living a different method of recovery. That, recovery looks so different for so many of us. And I don't think we acknowledge how similar that is. Like even someone who just has some, I don't want to say just has some, because that's terrible minimization, right? Someone who's gone through some childhood trauma, but maybe never got into drugs, but sought out therapy for healthier relationships later in life. Like they are also in a recovery type life, right? They're probably focused on self-growth and some spirituality. And so I think they could be also very in tune with a recovery type lifestyle, even if they're not in our program. And so it just gets interesting when we look at those kind of things and the differences. But yeah, there was not a whole lot of people who wanted to speak up about their dating or marriage preferences. And maybe them not speaking up was wise and kept their marriages intact for another week.
Yeah. Well, and after my wife said that to me, I went back and listened to the whole episode to make sure I didn't say anything that I regretted. And there was one or two little things in there I was like, meh. And I'm like, nah, you can listen. It's fine.
Right. So we also, I wanted to point out, so Voices of Hope has their online virtual rubber ducky race, which... this just I don't know. I think my wife actually brought this to my attention. I just think it's hilarious that they're going to have like a rubber ducky race online, and you buy a duck, I guess. Is that how it works?
Yeah, you buy a duck and you float it down the thing and you win a prize. Whoever crosses first, they get numbers. They have numbers on them.
That's fucking cool. Yeah. I'm definitely buying a duck just for the hell of it, because I got nothing better to do. And the money goes to a good cause to help, the still suffering people out there who are struggling to find a new way to live in some way, shape, or form.
And I should know more about what the prizes are and stuff, but I don't at this point. I think it's coming up in next. Isn't it next?
No,
month?
I think it's September. So it's
like
2 months away.
Say it's like 2 months away. Yeah, I knew it was a while away yet. So
it is. It's just, it seems so funny to me and hilarious that I couldn't help. I posted it on our Facebook page, so if you need to find it, you can find it through our Facebook page or through Voices of Hope if you're interested. It's not till September. You have some time. I don't know why. I'm sure it's been done before. It just seemed...
Oh, yeah, they've done it before.
Unique and hilarious to me.
Yeah.
So.
And, I mean, it's like... So, sometimes it's kind of fun to, laugh and have fun with recovery and recovery-related things. I know in our area, at one point a few years back, they talked about doing, a Dope Fiend Olympics, where they were going to have, different, bad idea events that, were sort of stigmatizing but not, would be fun, throw a bunch of white crumbs on the floor and see who could pick up the most crumbs in 30 seconds and things like that, and it got voted down. I guess some people got upset about it, but sometimes it's fun to just do silly things and laugh at yourself and not take things quite so serious.
Well, and it's so tricky. They've done that Dope Fiend Olympics in some places, and the idea and the concept is hilarious, and it's the same struggle I have with all the memes I make up to put on our page and on our Instagram and stuff. It's generally the more offensive they are, the funnier they get, right? And that's that fine line I try to walk between I don't want to do harm to people, and at the same time I do need to laugh at myself and the situations I find myself in. Funny enough, it comes up in the 7-step reading, and so that will definitely be part of what we talk about today. One last thing I did want to mention before we get into that, I had a message from a friend of ours, Amanda, today, who still shocks me. One of a few people that listen that is not particularly themselves, an addict. And I'm just always, I'm like, normal people listen to us? For fucking what? We're crazy, right? And I don't know. It's always so nice that, because I even asked, I'm like, why do you listen, right? And she kind of explained that a lot of our struggles are her struggles too. And I guess it's so nice to feel normalized that, like, maybe the things we struggle with on a daily basis, maybe we're really not as different as everybody else as we like to think we are, right? Terminally unique, it talks about in the 7-step reading. But it's just nice to feel like, damn, maybe everybody struggles with this shit. Maybe, yeah, for us it's a little different. Like, we could go, shoot some heroin and die, unfortunately. But in general, like, we struggle with the same things everybody else does. And, I don't know, that felt kind of nice, but the other part of what she messaged about was she was just listening to the cliches episode, and she was kind of highly offended by the let go and let God being a little belittled by you.
I've just got a good take for it. I'm willing to listen. I haven't.
And this is what I've found with almost every cliche that people don't like, or that somebody wants to defend. It's the cliche itself is not actually the problem. It's more so that it's been used in a way that it makes the person who's heard it or been on the receiving end of it feel like it's not very useful for them, or they felt like they've been dismissed and not heard. That's what it seems like with a lot of these cliches. Like, the cliche itself is fine, but if you tell somebody to it in the moment of their distress, it sounds kind of shitty when you say it to them. So her deal, and I was like, oh, maybe she's a believer that, like, is really offended by that. And no, she's not. She doesn't believe in God either. I was like, oh, well, that doesn't. Yeah. So apparently her story was that she had some anxiety, and just saying let go and let God reminds her that there are a lot of things that are out of her control, and she needs to not try to control them, basically. And it lowered her anxiety in saying that, and that being her reminder. And so I just thought that was incredible. Like, here I am. I thought she was going to bitch about, like, being a believer and you being, I guess, a non-believer. I still don't know. An atheist? Agnostic? What are you?
I don't know. I tried to find out today. I'm not really sure.
But it was like, man, she went the whole other way. Sometimes I got to laugh at the irony. She went the entire other way with it and just said, no, I just use it because it's useful. And I'm like, damn. Yeah. I guess that's how cliches work. They're just useful for some people, whether they truly make sense or not, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I guess I could go back to the Forrest Gump, stupid is as stupid does. Like, I never understood that, what it even means. It goes over my head. I guess maybe I'm not smart enough to figure it out. But it's like, a saying like that, like, that's kind of how I feel about the let go and let God. It's like, I don't get what that means, If someone else can take comfort in it, great. That's awesome. I just don't understand what that means.
So I don't know that this is right. Forrest Gump lovers, please correct us if we're wrong. I thought stupid is as stupid does was the point that people call him stupid, as in his, apparently he's got some kind of brain stuff going on that's not quite up to par with what we would decide was normal for our society. He's a little slower than the rest of the world. So people call him and refer to him as stupid, but he's comforted by his mother saying stupid is as stupid does, meaning it doesn't really matter what people think of how smart you are in your brain. How are you living, right? And he did all these great feats. Like, he did the next right things when he needed to, and he was kind to people. And so, like, is that really stupid? Or is stupid people who do stupid things? Like, you can be as smart as you want, but you're a jerk to your kids or your wife or something. That's how I always took it. Yeah. I don't know. So, are we ready for step 7?
Sure.
Okay. Step 7. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. Which, oh my God. Obviously, humility must be a huge part of this step. So I've already decided I must suck at this step. That's not my my highest, asset. But I'm curious, do you have any takes on it just to start? What do you think about step 7?
So of course for me, humility is probably the key ingredient, spiritual principle there in this step. It starts with, we go through this series of these other steps up through our inventory and sharing that with other people so that we can get a chance to try to figure out who and what we really are. You know, that most of us, you know, we always, or I can't say we, I would judge myself by what I thought I was supposed to be, and then I was constantly falling short of all of those. So therefore I was a piece of shit, and I was no good, and I was a worthless human being, and you know, I didn't deserve anything, and all those negative things we tell ourselves, because I didn't have the ability to look at myself honestly. You know, I couldn't see, like, yes, I have assets and I have liabilities, and you know, I can choose to work on my liabilities and try to get better at them, and I can choose to, you know, own my assets and try to, you know, use them more productively in my life, things like that. I wasn't doing that when I was using. I had some, what I thought I was supposed to be in my head compared to the way I was really living, and those two things didn't line up.
And so where do you think that comes from? Like, I heard you say that we tried to measure up to this image we had of what we were supposed to be. Where does that image come from in your mind? Like, where does it get twisted that it's not just, hey, we're just supposed to be human, where we make mistakes and falter and learn from it, and like, who gives us this twisted image that we're trying to live up to that we can't?
I mean, I can't say for sure. I know in my case, I can tell you some things about my background that I think shaped that, but I don't know if they'll answer that question exactly. So, my parents were loving, kind people. They were, you know, good people overall, but my mom was pretty critical and pretty harsh, judgmental wise. She also wasn't very outwardly, like, loving with like hugs and praise and affection. You know, those were things that were very much missing in my house. And then my dad, when we were young, worked a lot, you know, worked a lot of hours, wasn't home a ton, and wasn't overly affectionate himself. And that's probably why him and my mom got along so well, because neither of them were overly affectionate with each other or with us. That on top of, I was, you know, sexually abused as a kid at a young age. And then also the fact that we went to like a Catholic school and were raised, you know, in the Catholic tradition. Like, there were a lot of things about myself that I felt like I was just a bad person, you know, that I was never good enough, that, you know, unless I was perfect at everything all the time, you know, there was something wrong with me.
It's interesting because I think, you know, I would say, oh, yeah, well, you know, my experience must be everybody's. We must all have had this critical parent in our household that, you know, gave us this flawed schema or core belief system. And yet I know there's people who didn't have any real parent to speak of in their household, so they couldn't have been a critical one. And I'm just curious if it's all these factors put together, which I'm sure it's some portion of that. You know, biology would say, oh, it's DNA. Some of that's just in your core genetics, that you're going to have these type of belief systems about yourself. And then there's, you know, the parental input, there's the peer input, society's input, Hollywood's input, and as a whole, this all leads us to what, you know, the mental health field would say your core belief or your schema is that there's something wrong with me. And so all the information you take in comes through that lens. It's kind of like if you've ever looked through a filtered lens, like if you've looked at a page and you have on blue sunglasses that have blue lenses and you can't see any of the blue, right? And so it's almost like we put lenses on like that in our lives where, you know, we put on these lenses where we can't see any of the positives we do. And so all we take in, because of this core belief system, all we take in is things that line up with, I'm not good enough.
And I would tweak that just a sec, because we had an interesting, when you talk about putting on lenses and colors, we had an interesting experience last night, and I think it ties into what you're talking about here. So we have some camping chairs, and they're these blue, like, you know, royal blue camping chairs. And we were at a friend's house, and they have one of those yellow bug lights, you know, outside. And then as it got dark, you know, and the yellow light was coming down, all of a sudden these chairs looked green, like completely green. So and you could take your, your white light from your phone and shine it on there and see that it was blue. But it was just a really neat sort of, hey, look at this kind of sciencey thing. When you take this color out, you see it this way. And it's almost, I think, like that. Like, we see ourselves through these lenses to where it's not that we don't necessarily see assets, but we start to look at them differently, like, and I say that because for me, like, growing up through addiction, maybe as a survival mechanism or whatever, like, I started to think, like, caring about other people or putting other people's needs, not just doing what you wanted. Like, these were like weaknesses. They weren't assets, they were weaknesses. And I saw them, and I recognized these principles that other people lived by and thought, oh, those, people that are just living their life serving others and not putting their needs first, like, they're suckers. They're not doing what they need to do for themselves, and they're letting other people walk on them. Like, this thing that would be an asset all of a sudden became a liability to me.
It's interesting, the chair, I like that idea, the yellow light and the blue chair, and it really brings us to just how I went through life thinking there was this set of rules, facts, truths that existed, and nothing could change that. And to learn that a lot of things in the world are really just perception, and perception can be changed depending on, like we talk about, the lens you're using to look at it, is mind-blowing. To think about, what color's the sky, Billy?
I would say blue.
Right. And yet, if you said orange, at sunset, you're right. Right? Like, but
Right.
if you told me the sky was orange, I'd be like, you're fucking crazy. What's wrong with this guy?
Or
Sky's
gray.
orange.
Yeah.
Right. And so those type of things, when you had the realization that the sun doesn't actually come and go. Like, the sun's always there. It's the clouds that come and go, right? It just doesn't seem to line up with what we really think about. And so maybe we'll do a whole episode on perception at some time. I don't want to get us too lost in the woods right now about step 7. But yeah, I think that's incredible. I would say step 7 for me was like the culmination of, I'm trying to figure out how to do this for somebody not in a 12-step program, right? Somebody who's not working the steps. Like, so 4, we write down basically our life history, right? We kind of like do a written version of our life history so we can look at it from a third person point of view. It's kind of like the principle of, if my friend comes to me with a relationship problem, it's really easy for me to see what the fuck he's got to do in his relationship because I don't have feelings about his relationship. I can just tell him what makes sense. And he's really confused and it doesn't make sense to him. And yet for me, when I'm in a relationship, it's the exact same way. I can't see clearly what it is I need to do. So when I write 4 and I put my life story on paper, it's a little clearer to me to look at it from a different perspective. 5, I get to share that with an even further removed from feeling perspective, and, with God and with myself out loud and get some more insight into it. 6, I start to look at the places in my life that really don't, I act in ways to try to get what I want that aren't necessarily ways that benefit me long term, right? I sit on the couch and watch whatever instead of going and doing the dishes because it feels better to sit on the fucking couch and eat some donuts than to go do the dishes in the moment. But what I start to learn in 6 is that at the end of the night, I feel like shit for not getting the dishes done. Whereas if I go do the dishes, I feel better later, right? So 6 is to me like kind of recognizing the ways that I chase instant gratification over the long-term, better feeling about myself. And then 7 would be, I don't know how to describe this for somebody who's not in recovery and also not a believer in a bigger power. Like, I think through the literature that I was reading, it kind of made me think maybe I just involve other people in like, hey, Billy, you're a good buddy of mine and I trust you and I want to change my habits. Can you help me change my habits by helping me to, point them out in me when you see them? Maybe? Like, is that...
Yeah, so, all right, I'll use a little bit different analogy. So your description there was really good of the going through the step process. I would use the analogy of, let's take furniture. Like, let's say I have some furniture in my apartment. It's old, kind of crappy furniture. And before I found recovery, what I like to do is move that furniture around into different positions and think that it looked different. And now all of a sudden, well, this is a better arrangement. This furniture looks better now. But then when I sit on it, there's still a spring poking me in the ass, and it's still all out of whack, and you fucking fall through the recliner doesn't work anymore, whatever. Right. And all I can do on my own is keep moving that furniture around. What I really need is to go out and get new furniture, and I need, and this is where the higher power or power greater than me comes in. It's like, I can't make new furniture on my own in my apartment. I got to go outside of myself. I got to look to things outside of me to find the tools and resources and things I need to bring back with new furniture. So 6 is recognizing that my furniture sucks and that it's shit, and that as long as I keep moving that furniture around, it's still the same crappy furniture. It might look different on that wall, still the same crappy couch. And 7 is going, I need to go outside of myself. I need to get out of this apartment and go outside of myself to get the tools and resources that I need to fix my room.
Maybe somebody to help me build new furniture, maybe a furniture store that has access to more furniture, maybe a friend to help me carry furniture in.
And that's where the uniqueness of someone's individual recovery path and their sponsorship, right. Your crappy furniture is going to be different than my crappy furniture. My crappy furniture has different, things with it. Maybe mine can be fixed. Maybe I need new. Maybe it needs to be thrown out. And same with yours. And maybe you can build your own furniture. Maybe you go to a church to get your furniture, all these different things. But that's where our individual recovery path comes in, is how and where we get our new furniture.
I love that analogy, and since we like to change the wording of every step to make it better, step 7 will now be, we humbly asked him to replace our furniture. That's the fucking way we're going.
So funny enough, we just heard a story yesterday. So we were at a cookout with some people in recovery, and we had a guy sharing about, I think and I might mess this up a little bit, but he had said he had celebrated, I think, 7 years twice. And what he realized the first time around, and as he read through the basic text the first time, he would say to himself things like, oh, there should be a comma here, and oh, they could have said this better if they did that, and oh, we should have done this, this could have been different if it was said like this. And then he relapsed. And when he came back the second time, he realized to try to identify the concepts and the principles. So it was interesting.
That's really interesting, because I actually have a very similar story.
Yeah.
I had gotten almost 18 months at one point, and I picked out every misspelled word in our fucking literature. And there was a version of the traditions, the readable tradition laminated sheet that we read before it, and it was like very widely circulated. Instead of saying are stronger than those, it said stronger that those. Like somebody had misspelled then and put the T at the end by accident. Autocorrect, who the fuck knows? But I used to pick that shit apart, and then sure enough. And somebody even pointed it out to me, but I couldn't change it. Yeah. It's like, that's just who I was at that time.
Well, see, and that's where humility comes in. Like, humility comes in where we learn, like, hey, that's a part of who I am. That's not something I like about myself. It's okay. I don't have to hate myself or, degrade myself or belittle myself, because that doesn't help anything.
Right.
But I need to recognize that about myself. Like, that's a part of who I am. And if I'm not careful, that shit will get me into trouble. And that's the difference between, like, being overly critical or overly judgmental of ourselves and having what I would call, like, honest humility. I was joking with Jason before this. I said, with you before this, that, like, I actually did a little research on this one beforehand. I was reading through the basic text, and there was something that, because humility is such a huge part of my recovery for me, because I was such an egomaniac and still am, and it's still a thing I gotta really keep an eye on, that, I think I'm smart, and I think I got shit figured out, and I can think my way out of all kinds of problems.
That must be awful to deal with.
Yeah. So I have to really be on top of that. And so in the basic text, it talks about, humility as being the, the core of this step. And it says, to be truly humble is to, whoa, that just jumped. There we go. To be truly humble is to accept and honestly try to be ourselves. None of us is perfectly good or perfectly bad. We are people who have assets and liabilities. Most important, we are human. and that's important for me because I can say, yeah, I tend to be an egomaniac. I tend to be someone who thinks really highly of myself and less of others. And I don't have to hate myself for it. I don't have to think, gosh, if I didn't have if I spend all my time thinking about what I could be doing, what I should be doing, how I should be acting, how bad I am because I don't do this or that thing, I'm not really fixing the problem.
Right. We're not going to beat ourselves into being better people. And
Right.
and one thing that you stuck out clearly, like, and because I said I couldn't change that as who I was at that point in time in my life. Like, I was just a guy who, that's what I saw, flaws. That was my old furniture. That's what I was given when I was growing up. You're going to see flaws in everything and nothing positive about anything. It's what it is. I will say this, when you see somebody who's constantly picking out the flaws in everything in the world and people around them, know this for sure. That's how they treat themselves all fucking day long, right? And so I just didn't have another perspective. I didn't have the ability to get my furniture out, and I hadn't made it that far in the steps yet. I only got to, I want to say 5 at that point in time. And so I wasn't there yet. I didn't have new furniture. I hadn't gotten a new recliner, right, to lay back in and say, well, they misspelled a word, no big deal. But you're right. Yeah. Recognizing that it is part of us. And ultimately, what I always forget about, I want the steps to fix me and get rid of these problems. And I always think that these are problems. And I forget that it tells us right in there, character defects are basic character traits of humans that we have blown out of proportion. I don't really necessarily, it's not healthy if I get rid of it. I just need to put it back in proportion. And I forget that a lot.
Yeah, and I think that's why it talks about being human. Like, no person is all good or all bad. We all have these different traits that work together, and we're all going to make mistakes. And, the difference is, making an honest mistake versus an intentional mistake, or say that.
Repeated mistake, maybe?
Yeah, or staying stuck in things that aren't good or aren't healthy or are going to harm others, and then doing it anyway out of selfishness.
Right.
It was which is what I did when I was using. I knew stealing wasn't right. I knew taking advantage of my family wasn't right, but I did it anyway.
So let's, before we get into more of these quotes, since we've got a basic running description here of step 7, let's take a break here and play our voices ad, and we'll be right back. It's not bad, 32 minutes. Keeping track of the time, I like it. So 5 minutes in we started. I think that was useful. Where are we at? 10:15. Oh, golden. Son sending me TikToks that I never understand. Dude, I never thought I would be so old I didn't understand what the kids are doing. I don't fucking understand what the kids are doing.
I know. I feel the same way.
He sends me TikToks and I'm like, I'll watch it like 3 times and I'm like, what the fuck is that supposed to mean? I don't get it. Then I gotta ask him. I'm like, dude, I don't get it. You gotta explain it to me.
Oh yeah, well, Billy makes references to all these YouTube videos and stuff that I don't know anything about, or these, YouTubers that I've never seen. Oh, that's like fucking PewDiePie, don't you know? And PewDiePie did that thing. I'm like, no, I don't know that. I don't spend my time watching PewDiePie.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm lost on a lot of that. So what is the quote you just read? Because I know I have that in here and I need to not read it again.
It was in like, it was, we examine, yeah. To be truly humble is to accept and honestly try to be ourselves. None of us is perfectly good or perfectly bad.
Is that like the second paragraph or the third paragraph?
Let's see. That would be the second paragraph.
Okay. Having decided that we want God to relieve us of our useless or destructive aspects of our personality. Yeah, okay. That's good. I didn't write that whole paragraph in here, but I did write entire second paragraph.
Yeah, the whole thing's good. I felt the same way. Like, I can't read the whole thing.
Okay, so when we come back, I do have one more thing to say about that. Just a little thing. And then a bunch of others. But if you want, you're welcome to go through, and I'll try to, keep up with not repeating them. There was so much good stuff in the readings, though. I really did take whole paragraphs.
Such a short reading, and it's like the whole thing is pretty relevant.
I got some long paragraphs out of there that were just really good. what are we going to talk about next week? We're going to try to get somebody. So if we get somebody on, are we going to have them on Google Meet and then we'll have our microphone and we'll just talk to them? Is that how we're going to do it?
Yeah, if they're remotely, you can't come in. Yeah,
it's going to be interesting.
I mean, we always have, and I don't know, either Aaron, male Aaron, to talk about smart recovery. I can't say always have. I mean, I don't know what his fucking plans are, so he might not be available on Sunday. But that's someone who, like I say, he's been doing that for a while. He facilitates a smart recovery meeting in this area.
I almost, and not that it's a terrible thing, because we've realized we can ask, hey, well, what made you decide? But he hasn't really left NA. Yeah. I almost want somebody who solely does that, or who just only did that from the beginning. I'm curious.
Right. And I've thought that too. I've felt the same way. It's like, well, you really do NA, and as much as you want to try, you can't parse out what you get from where or which.
Right.
I mean, you might be able to see like this one has these benefits, but I thought as far as if we kept it more focused on like what is smart, what is it, who's it good for, like what, those more general kind of questions versus maybe his personal experience.
Right.
Like for him, I think that would be a better conversation than to start, how has smart changed your life? And, because he's an NA person.
Right.
He just does smart because we need somebody to do it.
Right.
But he might be able to explain it. And then, or I don't know if we reached out to him, if he would know. Like, I don't know if there's other smart facilitators around, or if he knows anybody else who's really into smart in a more meaningful way.
Yeah, I don't know. I would think if there were those people, they would be around here running meetings, and I don't think there are other meetings around here.
Well, I thought maybe just like recovery Dharma, like it might be bigger. They might have more down towards Baltimore or up towards Philly, and I know like through Voices they do a lot with like the Harm Reduction Coalition down through Baltimore and stuff like that. So he may even just know someone and be like, oh, this guy, he's all about smart, or even Jen or Aaron might know somebody. I should say we could try that way, and then just contact that person and say, hey, would you like to come on and talk about smart?
Are we open to having people? Are we open to having programs described that aren't for drug addiction recovery? Like, I was assuming we were, but I definitely wanted to double check. Like, are we willing to explore Overeaters Anonymous and what that's like? Because
sure.
I would think people who end up in our fellowship might also. I think it's a large thing that we tell people they don't need to go anywhere else, and I really don't like that anymore.
No, I thought same thing with that. Adult children of alcoholics, like if you need to talk to someone from there, and even Al-Anon,
cool.
I'm open to all that kind of stuff.
Okay. All right, I just got to find somebody. It's hard. I don't want to just invite the first person I see. I want to have dialogue with them and say, oh, man, we sent some messages. They have something useful to talk about.
Right. Make sure they're like halfway. I don't want to say interesting people. Everybody's interesting in their own way, but if you get people on that aren't really knowledgeable, it comes off bad.
Yeah, you definitely want them to be knowledgeable, have a place in the program. I do know a lady who's in Al-Anon who I've liked talking to a little bit here and there. She might be a good fit. But if I can't find them for next week and I have to schedule them 2 weeks out, I really need to get on top of it, though, because I will just keep doing that. And then it'll be like, well, if I can't find them 4 weeks from now.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about sponsorship next week if we don't have a person?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Too.
I can't believe we haven't done that. I just can't for the life of me believe we haven't done that. Oh, man. All right. Are we ready for this? Taking enough of a break. Anybody got pee?
I better.
Okay.
Might as well.
I didn't have to until I said that. Now I'm curious.
I didn't either until you said that. I'm like, oh, yeah. I guess I should.
Play. Why? Why not play? Oh, here we go. Maybe. That was the TikTok. I was getting rickrolled by my son. Nice. Oh shit! I just opened something up, and I didn't mean to.
Funny that that's a thing.
All right. Let me. Shit. Let me go to the bathroom.
I know now I'm mad I don't have my highlighter. It's so hard to try to read while you're talking, and I'm like trying to read. I'm like, God damn it! I pulled the book out this morning, highlighted like 4 things. It was like shit. Mad at myself.
I actually have to share 2 7th-step meetings this week. Monday on Zoom and then Wednesday. Oh yeah. What time do you get home from work?
Usually like by 5:30.
Oh, okay. Do you want to go to a meeting Wednesday night in Delta, Pennsylvania?
Possibly, yeah.
I gotta go share on the
Yeah,
7th
for
step.
sure. I gotta check with Jan what's going on, but I know that's her home group night, so.
Yeah.
But she didn't go anywhere. She does it at home, so. And we have kids that can stay home.
But yeah, do you know Paul? I don't want to say his last name. From Harford County area, apparently moved up to PA like 2 years ago. You might know him if you've seen him. I don't know. He asked me to do it on the 7th step. Oh, I didn't tell you this either. The girl asked you to share on the 13th, the 20th instead, if that's okay.
Okay, should be fine.
Okay, just.
I gotta change that in my calendar.
She had messaged and said it was an anniversary and she had forgotten.
So that was July 13th. Let's change this.
And I
The 20th.
want to say it's some kind of random literature or something.
7:30 to 8:30. What'd you tell me?
I don't know. It'll be a big shock. I guess I could look it up.
Well, I just gotta know so that I know where to get the link.
Right. It's in the.
And B, what time to.
I don't think you're signed into our Instagram, but I can always send you the link. That's not hard.
Oh, that's the one. Yeah, I'm not signed into Instagram.
It's 7:30. Oh, it's an hour and 15-minute meeting too. It'll be a literature-based open discussion.
So are they gonna read something?
I'm assuming they would read something and then you'd probably
Well, I'm
talk
supposed to
about
read something
whatever
to read.
hits you.
Hmm.
Well,
Are you doing it first? When are you doing it?
I do it Monday. This Monday.
Okay.
On step
You can let me
7.
know. Oh, it's on
Which
step
I'm
7.
gonna take all this great information. I was like, yes, that's perfect. You know what? I should probably send you that sign-in stuff right now. just so I don't forget. Yes, that was smart. Good job, Jason. There it is. Incredible technology. I can send fucking signals to space.
Yeah,
and back.
in seconds.
Maybe they don't go to space, but whatever. It's still fucking cool. Okay. We ready?
Yeah.
What time is it? 27. Ooh, we're getting lengthy on our breaks. We're going to get unionized soon. Okay, so here we are back. I did want to make mention we're in a new location today, which how does that feel for you? Is it different? Is it weird?
I don't know. I like it. It feels comfortable.
I was thinking the same thing. Like for a new location, it definitely feels cozy.
Yeah, so I'm good with it. I like it.
I'm down with it too. So back to step 7. You were mentioning in the piece you read, one of the things that stuck out to me is that, and I've heard this quote before, this isn't the quote you actually read, but it's another way to say the same thing, and it says, figure out who you are and try to do it on purpose. And I've always loved that, right? Because especially when I got here, my concept of who I was terrible. And like the last thing I wanted to do was to try to be me. I spent my whole life trying to be some other shit that was better than me, right? And so the concept of, damn, really? I'm really supposed to try to be me on purpose? Like that's the best thing I can do in my life? And it is. And it's just mind-blowing. I don't know. I love that concept.
Yeah, and see, I think people get confused about the concept of humility. Like they think it implies some sort of humiliation or some sort of less than feeling or there's all this like negative
subservience
connotation that comes with this idea of humility. And for me, it's been the opposite. Like it's been almost empowering. It's like this idea that, we're all just human beings here on this earth. We all have assets and liabilities, and I have some things that I'm, really good at, and you might have some things you're really good at, and the next person has things they're really good at, and then I have things I struggle with, and everybody has things they struggle with, and, it really is almost empowering, It's a way for me to not feel so bad about who I am, that I'm not just, the ideal me isn't necessarily just all my best qualities, that I am also the character defects in my nature too.
Humility is very much a perspective changer, right?
Yes.
And that's what we talk about, a perspective. And you're right, we do look at it as all these other things besides a change in perspective. But it's interesting, I'm reading this book, The Untethered Soul. I always say reading, listening, whatever. Great fucking book, by the way. If you get a chance and you need an audiobook or a book to read, incredible book right at this moment. But one of the things it talks about is the practice of, they don't call it humility, but they say the practice of like, every time you go to get in your car to drive somewhere, stop for a second and remind yourself that you're on a rock flying through space, right? Just to get some perspective on like what's really important here. And then it says, and if that's not enough, do it every time you pull out your phone. Right before you look at your phone, remember to think, I'm on a rock flying through space. And like that's a humbling thought. Like, yeah, you're right. Like, what is so important here? Is me getting this little, dinner right and not burning my chicken nuggets fucking that critical to my life today? Or does it matter that much? So what's the next quote you had that you really liked?
Just the last thing about humility that I had was, humility is as much a part of staying clean as food and water are to staying alive.
That was the next one on my list, too. That's an incredible quote.
Yeah, and it's sort of, it sounds real prophetic and all that stuff, but it really, like say, for an egomaniac like myself, is so important to be like, man, I got to keep myself grounded. I can't let myself get, and I've done it at times, get too good for, recovery, get too good for my job, too good for my life. That's what'll happen to me. I get myself into some place where I don't fit in here. I don't belong here. I'm better than all these people. That's the shit that I say quietly to myself in my head. And if I don't remember, like, yeah, you're a dummy who was, ended up in jail with your best thinking. I need to kind of get some humility back in there, or I will ego my way right into fucking disaster.
Right. Yes, Jason, before you sought help, you slept on a park bench and ended up in prison. It is only through seeking help from other people that you've gotten where you've gotten. So
Right.
how fucking great are you at this moment?
Right.
No, it's a great reminder. But here's the moment of truth, right? Okay. So we realize we're not that humble. We say, okay, I'm not always that humble. I need to remain more humble, right? My character defect is a overblown ego or thinking too greatly of myself or a self-righteousness, right? And now I need to keep myself in check and remain humble. Step tells me I can't, right? We humbly asked him. That's kind of the point of 6, at least for me, what I had always heard was 6, I run into trying to fix character defects myself and butting my head against the wall, realizing I don't have that kind of power to just change myself overnight. So what do we do if we are not believers in a power greater than ourselves? No, that's not true. I'm sorry, I misstated that. You are a believer in a power greater than yourself, but not believers in a particular God. So how do we humbly ask him to remove these shortcomings? How do you do that? Because people need to hear this.
Right. And so, the next paragraph in the basic text starts out, the 7th step is an action step. It is time to ask God for help and relief. And if we took this God and changed it to good orderly direction with a lowercase g and not some magical power outside of ourselves, in that paragraph it goes on to tell you what the actions that are required. And it's being humble enough to listen to people when they give you criticism, being willing to acknowledge harms and wrongs that you do in your life. Most of the time, and this is where the humility comes in, without that humility, I run around thinking, well, I just do what I want and I don't care, and if it hurts you, oh well, it's your problem. You get over your own fucking feelings.
Call your sponsor.
Right. Or I don't care if you don't like that about me. But I find some humility, and then I begin to realize, oh shit, I'm running around causing harm in other people's life. My significant other's telling me you're doing this and it's hurting my feelings. My kids are, crying or upset or whatever because of actions and things that I've done. And I learned to sort of recognize, oh shit, you know what I mean? I am responsible for these things that I'm doing to other people. Then where I guess the solution comes in is, again, for me it's recovery, but if you have a power outside of myself is where the furniture analogy comes in. It's okay, so I don't of my own power know how to change those things. Where do I go and get the resources that I need to change those things? For me, in this case, it's recovery. I go to meetings. I listen to other people that are living a spiritual life. I might seek it out through books or readings about how to be more compassionate, be more caring, be more loving. But left to my own devices, I will not change. I have to go outside of myself to seek solutions to those problems.
Okay, so it's not so much that we can't apply the suggestions of somebody who maybe has some growth in that area, things they've done to try to be less self-righteous, right? We can apply those suggestions. It's not like that's out of our ability. It's just, for whatever reason, we can't seem to come to those suggestions all by ourselves. We need to seek it out through others, through self-help books, maybe even through mental health counseling if it needs it, to deal with some of our childhood traumas, which can help us act in different ways. Because one of the things I did realize in 7 was that in humbly asking him, whatever, to remove my shortcomings, what I was doing was the old Kleenex box shuffle, right? I guess facial tissue. I don't want to advertise for Kleenex, but whatever. It's pretty standard now. So you pull out a character defect, it gets removed, and then the next one pops up in its place, just like the Kleenex does when you pull it out. And so ultimately for me, I honestly stopped praying for that particularly. Not that I don't revert back to that when I'm in a particularly nasty defect, but I just try to pray for a greater love of myself, because I found that was the true reason I acted on all these things, was because I just didn't have enough self-love to be okay. And so I used all these defects blown out of proportion to try to protect that fragile feeling I had that one of these things was going to expose me for the piece of shit I was. And so through self-love, I've had less reason to act on defects. And so I don't know. That's it. Like maybe through mental health, that's an aspect we can explore. That we can deal with some of that underlying issues, and then we don't have to act as much. And that could be a power greater than us. That's not so. I can't go and do therapy on myself, right? Like that's impossible. I need other people to help with that.
And I guess I struggle with your question in the opposite direction of like, okay, so if you are a religious person or you have a God perspective, do you think that means you just pray a lot and then do nothing about it? Like, is that how that works? I mean, it says we humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. Does that mean I just pray and then sit back and wait for something to change on its own?
This kind of reminds me of an episode I did, episode 50 on my own podcast, by the way. Exciting. I got to 50. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, but it was kind of about it doesn't matter necessarily what I'm doing. The outcome doesn't depend on that, right? Like sometimes I'm putting in all the work. I'm doing all the prayers. I'm hitting meetings. I'm talking to sponsors. I'm working my step. I'm talking to my sponsees and helping them. I'm doing all the right spiritual practices, right? And sometimes I'm still just in a bad or a rough place and in a shitty mood. And then sometimes I'm like living it up, like going to strip clubs, fucking ignoring any spiritual suggestion, and life feels great, right? So I would say it doesn't even like it's not that I don't do anything in particular. Like, yeah, obviously I keep living. I keep personally trying to like stop acting on these defects, which doesn't seem to work. But I do become obviously more greatly aware of them and more greatly aware of the pain and wreckage they leave in my life and the lives of those I care about, right? So those things are happening. That's the action that's going on. I'm trying to take care of this character defect. I'm not having much success. I finally surrender to the fact that I just am not in control of it, right? Kind of like the drugs. It's beating me up. Now I gotta surrender to it. And so the surrender is kind of like what the ultimate action of my process comes to. But where I include the higher power in this for me is that it's not up to me when this defect goes. I can do all the right actions, and you know what? I can still have this defect for the next 5 fucking years. Like, it's really not my call when it gets removed. And that's where I say that's the higher powers thing. Like, I'm going to have it until I'm supposed to be fucking done with it. And then when that time comes, maybe even through no further effort of my own, I could just be doing the same things I've done for the last 3 years. And then one day, it's just not there anymore.
Yeah. And I hear all that, like your initial description, in a different way. So I hear that and I think, yeah, that's actually an indicator of why we need powers greater than ourselves in our lives or outside of ourselves in our lives, because we aren't good at an honest fucking assessment of who we are and how we're living. If I'm doing all these good spiritual things in my life and I still feel like shit, then I am out of touch with my spirit. If I believe that these are my values, this is the person I want to be, this is what makes me the best person I could possibly be in my life, and I'm doing all those things and I still feel like a piece of shit, there's a disconnect there. And then vice versa. If I'm out living like a piece of shit and I feel like I'm fine and it's great and life's wonderful, that's a disconnect as well. Like, that's the disconnect that I lived in the whole time that I was using.
It could be. I mean, it definitely talks about later in the step. I think it's in 10, maybe it's in 2. I don't know. It talks about how sometimes we can be feeling different than how we're doing, right? And I think that's just a thing. Like, I don't think it matters. I don't always have to be disconnected just to wake up one day and feel bad about life. Like, it just happens.
And that's similar to our defects, I would say, or our feelings. Like, I'm not, like, I shouldn't feel bad that I feel bad. Like, that's not the point, I guess, what I was trying to say. I mean more directly that the powers greater than me, my support group, my wife, my sponsor, people outside of myself can help to point out to me, like, hey, look, take an honest look at what you're doing here. You shouldn't, you don't need to feel this way. You're really a loving, I mean, sometimes, just my wife saying, you're a really good husband and father and you should be proud of yourself. It's like, fuck, man, that can really turn around a day. That can turn around the rest of a day. or getting, whatever, praise at work or something like that. Like that positive reinforcement for like, yeah, you know what? You're doing the right things. And it's tough right now, but, you're a good person and you deserve good things. And, that sort of positive reinforcement helps me not give up on myself, because I want to give up, be like, fuck this sucks, I don't want to do this anymore.
Right. And so I could see that. For me, I think what I get help with in the feelings aspect is not having the secondary feeling, right? That's the one that just crushes my fucking hope. Like, I can feel bad. That's okay. I can feel depressed. That's okay. It's that next feeling that comes with it, that judgment of it, like, oh, well, it's never going to fucking be better. As you're doing all the right things, and here you are feeling shitty anyway. Fuck it. You might as well throw it in the towel, right? Whereas, or the whole, oh, you feel bad, and then the secondary feeling is, well, why do you feel bad? You should feel fine. What the fuck's wrong with you? Why do you feel bad when everything's fine, right? And so for me, my ability to get assistance from a power greater than me with feelings is just to remember, okay, you feel bad. Let's get up, go to work, eat breakfast, whatever it is you're doing today, and just understand that some days you feel bad, and that's okay, and it won't be permanent. Like, let's just keep moving. And so that's where I think my help has come in with that. And I keep hitting my goddamn foot on this thing, and it hurts.
And maybe that humility of, like, other people feel bad at times too. It's not the end of the, for me, it's the end of the world. And I think that's what becomes so overwhelming, I think, for addicts sometimes, is like, when I feel bad about myself, like, I have, like, self-loathing. Like, it's not like, oh, I did this, and because I think, anyone that gets criticism is going to feel a little bad. I mean, I don't, even constructive criticism is still kind of like, ooh, it's like that little, punch to the gut kind of thing. And that's normal. But as an addict, I tend to take it to an extreme, and I either feel like a total piece of shit, or I get so defensive that whatever you just said, I can dismiss offhand and be like, well, that's just bullshit, and you're just an asshole. And it's one of those two extremes. Right. Like, to be able to hear it and go, huh, is that relevant? Like, does that really fit? Like, wow, I really do that. And that's not so good, like. And
that's exactly the rest of the paragraph you just started. You started with the seventh step is an action step, and it is time to ask God for help and relief. We have to understand that our way of thinking is not the only way. Are you fucking kidding me? Really? Are you sure? So that's, other people can give us direction, right? That's something I struggled with for a long time, and I think I can still struggle with if I don't pay attention on a daily basis. And then it says, when someone points out a shortcoming, our first reaction may be defensive. May be defensive is the fucking understatement of this book. I'm pissed. I'm pissed when somebody points out a defect of character. I don't want to hear that bullshit. I want to fucking tear them apart and tell them how much they suck. Right. And then it says, we must realize we are not perfect. There will always be room for growth, no matter how far we've come. And they're right. Like, if I just look at it as, hey, there's always room for growth, I can accept what they say. If we truly want to be free, we will take a good look at input from fellow addicts. It's so hard to remember that when people say some shit, especially when it's people we already judge and don't like.
Right.
That there's probably some grain of truth in this, right? Maybe not. Maybe once in a while there's the offhanded, attack on you that is really coming from a place of just they've lost their mind or whatever. In general, there's usually some truth to what people say about me, at least. And I don't always want to see that. And it says the trick is to examine it, right? We get the time to sit and examine it. If it doesn't apply, we can let it fly. But where it goes, if the shortcomings we discover are real and we have a chance to be rid of them, we will surely experience a sense of well-being. And I had that whole paragraph. I'm like, that's a fucking powerful paragraph. So many different aspects. Like, I definitely hate when people criticize me. I fucking hate it.
But see, and I mean, for me, like, that is actually the essence of the step. Like, when it talks about, it says in there it's an action step, and then it goes on to outline the actions that we take. And none of them are, we pray and sit on our hands and wait for miracles to happen. Like,
they're not, but the first line throws me off because it says it's time to ask God for help and relief. And I always, I don't know. It's so interesting to me to hear the other side of it. And I love it. I think it's great that we come with both sides of it, right? I get to bring, I really almost wish we had a Christian type belief person in here because I think that's so prevalent that people find that really useful too, to hear that side of it.
And so, I would say my wife is Christian, and so we were talking about some of this morning, and I asked her similar questions to what we've been talking about, and she said for a lot of her sponsees, like there is and I'm going to call it magical, she wouldn't probably call
Flying
it magical.
spaghetti
Maybe
monster?
she would. But, she said for a lot of sponsees, some of her advice is, you have this defect or shortcoming that you're struggling with is like just pray about it for 30 days and see what happens. Just pray about it for 30 days, every day for 30 days and see what happens.
Interesting.
And she says it's miracles happen with that stuff. And whether that's God revealing to you through a meeting, going somewhere that you might hear something that you've heard 100 times that never really seemed to fit, or hear something for the first time that you've never heard before, or a speaker say something that just hits, your spirit in a way that's like, fuck, that's exactly where I'm at right now. Like that might be how God's working.
I'm sure it would be argued that like you're just bringing awareness to it by praying. You're really just bringing awareness of your own mind
my argument,
to it.
But I'm trying to take the God side here, Jason. This is my defending God.
I love it. Did you have more quotes that you had lined up, or I do if not?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay.
I probably do, but it's down here.
Another little section I really liked that said the word humble applies because we approach this power greater than ourselves to ask for the freedom to live without the limitations of our past ways. And this was kind of, I don't want to say it was mind-blowing, because I could say that about every goddamn thing, and I ruined the statement, but I've always, especially up until this step, I look at defects of character as things that get me what I want, right? These are things that bring me pleasure because I get what I want and they feel good, right? If that's as deep as stepping outside of my relationship to have, live out sexual fantasies with other women, or if that's as small as like, getting over on somebody for $1, like they bring me pleasure in some ways, shape, or form in the now. And so my way of looking at defects is that they get me what I want. And yet in here it says we're asking for the freedom to live without limitations. And so this really reframes what a character defect is to me. Like I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, man, these defects, these things that get me what I want, right? And they're saying these defects are limitations to our freedom. And that's just we talk about shifts in perspective. Like that's a completely fucking different way to see it, and might make me want to do something about it.
Right. And I think that realization comes from the work in 6. In 6 we're examining these defects and examining these behaviors and being like, yeah, what I'm really looking for is this, but I'm doing this behavior and it's not really getting me the results that I want.
I need to take notes if I'm going to share these 7-step meetings this week. I feel like I'm going to forget all this shit. This sounds really, really good. Yeah. I just finished up 4 and 5, and I will say, as powerful as this 6 and 7 process is, I'm not really looking forward to it.
It's painful.
Right.
Humility is painful.
Yes.
Or can be painful.
There's a lot of growth in it, and that's the part of the pain I'm going to try to keep remembering. There's a lot of growth. And here's another quote. This growth is not the result of wishing, but of action and prayer. And I wrote that down just for you, Billy. I thought you would love that. Not the result of wishing. And I guess, so for me, the whole higher power thing, it's never about, I just expect this power to live my life for me or make me better all by itself. It's just that I give it control of the outcomes, basically. I trust in it, in the universal energy, that the outcomes will work out just the way they're supposed to, even if that's not the way I like. And I trust in a belief that there's a grand plan that's bigger than me. That's where the comfort I find in a universal type higher power. It's not so much in like, oh, this power is going to fucking take care of my life and I can just chill here and do nothing. It's just in allowing the outcomes to be what they are. That's where I get my comfort of a higher power.
Yeah, and I think there is a lot of comfort there. And I guess, I don't know exactly where in my recovery journey I've drifted over towards this agnostic sort of view towards a higher power. I think it came as a result of feeling what I felt was a lot of pressure from the program or even people inside the program. Maybe, self-made up, I don't know, but it felt like there was a lot of pressure that you got to have this higher power deity type belief that without this you will die. And that's come from people saying, oh, you better get a god and you better get all this stuff. And so I did that for a long time. And then what I found out for myself was crises or tragedies would come up in my life, and I was not able to rely on that deity made up power that I had tried to force into my life. That was not bringing me relief or comfort. And so over time, I've realized I don't care if you tell me what I need to believe. I'm going to figure it out for myself. And if I'm not really sure about, God, and if you go into like Richard Dawkins, I don't know if he has a book, a atheist book, and I can't remember the name of it at the moment, but it outlines like these 7 levels of, belief in God. And they go all the way from like, I'm 100% sure there is a God no matter what, to like I am 100% sure there is no God no matter what. I'm probably at like a, what I would call like maybe a 5 or possibly a 6, whereas like I'm not really sure. If I was a betting man, I'd probably bet there was no God. And we say God, like I mean like a deity, creator, controlling, manipulative force that sort of runs the universe. I would say I'd probably lean more towards there's not that in the world, but I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I don't know that I would be incredible. Well, I probably would be surprised if they came out and said, we figured out God. We know there's a guy up here. He sent us a message and fucking told us, like, yes, I'm God and I'm in charge and I'm going to make it rain for 3 days, watch. And then he made it rain for 3 days or whatever. Like, if that happened, I guess I would be shocked. But there are people that believe that that's how God works. And I felt like I was being forced to make that choice. So I've taken probably more of a agnostic approach lately, just to try to open that door of conversation or thinking.
I think it's hugely beneficial for a lot of people who struggle with God to be able to hear an informed view of how to do these things without that power doing it for them. I do tend to think that when you frame it as in like you think people who believe in God are just gonna they just sit at home and wish on a star that God's going to fix their life in recovery. And I'm like, that's completely not what I do. But it's interesting. I think it's for us to have multiple perspectives.
And I guess I worry because I feel like that's dangerous. Like, I don't feel like you do that, and that's great. And I like my wife. She doesn't do that at all. She's got a lot of, action and stuff behind this. And we still have some slight disagreements on some things because she is, Christian in the way that she thinks some of these things work, and she does. I mean, she describes it as almost like a magical element to some of this that I don't know why it works. It just does. When I do these things, it just happens. And I tend to look for the more rational or logical definition, almost like you talked about. Through prayer, I become aware, and then when something happens, I'm like, that's God. But really, it's not. It would have happened whether I prayed or not. It's just whether I would have been aware of it or not. So that's kind of a way that I'll explain the same things that she would explain in a different way. And that's the beauty of this, is that we can both do that. We can both gain all the benefits of this work and the steps and all that with two very different spiritual beliefs in a God.
It's incredible how many different versions of this program work. And that's why, so the one guy, Anonymous Addiction, I think the podcast is called, he's a little newer to it, but he's kind of left AA and says that AA is a religion and he doesn't like it, right? And I'm like dying to know, like but it kind of like what you just talked about, how you felt forced into a box with the God thing. Like I've never felt that. I've never, ever felt that anybody was... Like, all I've ever heard is, people defend our right to whatever God or not God that we want. I've had some internal thoughts and judgments towards people who don't have a God. And I'm like, how in the fuck do you work these steps then? But because there's no way they could work them the way I did. That's for sure. They had to have some other kind of way to do it, and I didn't understand. But I've never felt forced into a God or a religion or...
Well, and some of that's, it's like the politically popular thing. Like if you walked into a meeting, just per se, if you walked into a meeting and started off, your share or whatever by saying something like, I do not believe in a capital G God. I have not found a really good God in this program that works for me. Don't you think you would feel like
In the minority?
yes, or immediately sort of shut off by half the room? That I mean, I've had people approach me when I've said things like that after the meeting and try to convince me how wrong I was.
Wow.
And how, yeah, it's
See,
been awkward.
This is where I need more humility, because I'm like, fuck no. I would sound so profound after that they would obviously trust in my information. No, I really don't know. I've never had that experience. You keep saying lowercase or capitalized G God. I fucking hate capitalizing anything. I think the whole use of capitalization in the United States is fucking stupid and ridiculous. Why do we capitalize days of the week, months of the year? They're not that fucking special, right? My God does not need to be praised or worshipped. That's my own shit. I'm not trying to knock anybody who does. Mine doesn't, right? I like the idea of my God being lowercase g. My personal own name, yes, lowercase j, please. I don't need all this. Like, it just doesn't. I hate the capitalization system. And so I really try not to capitalize when I say God. Now, I will caveat, my phone autocorrects to a capital G frequently, and sometimes I bother to go back and fix it, and sometimes I'm just in too much of a hurry that I don't give a fuck. But I would much rather it be lowercase g.
So maybe that's more my argument, is if we lowercase g God and lowercase higher power so that it wasn't this formal thing, that it wasn't feeling like it was some like need to be identified, because that's how I interpret capitalizing things means
it's a certain one.
Yes, it's a
particular.
It's more of a concrete or specific type of thing, know. And so maybe this is me being anal and argumentative because I like to be argumentative.
Fuck yeah, that's.
But I'll go on it. So the sayings in in that same paragraph you just read, it says the main objective of step 7 is to get out of ourselves and try to achieve the will of our higher power. And again, higher power capitalized. Mm-hmm. And so I again I can almost put spiritual principles or spiritual living in place of any of this higher power thing and say, the will here is for get out of my own way and try to live like the will of spiritual living or the will of spiritual principles in my life. Trying to be a spiritual person when I don't want to be,
Read that sentence again for me.
So it says the main objective of step 7 is to get out of ourselves and strive to achieve the will of our higher power.
And so what's really interesting to me is that for a program that says, hey, you don't have to have a religion. You can have no religion. You don't need a fucking God if you don't want to. This program will work for you. It's so interesting that we have sentences like this that say that instead of putting in place of it what you just said. Yeah. Like, why do we need to say aligning with our higher power's will? Why can't we just say, whatever other thing we could say that isn't so descriptive or limiting?
Yeah.
I don't understand why we do that.
I don't either. So I want to be the voice of those people.
There you go. Another quote, one danger is being too hard on ourselves. And I think we already kind of mentioned the self-compassion and how crucial that is. We've spent a lot of our life with us and those around us being too hard on ourselves, right? We're not going to get better that way. One more I thought you would like. God often works through those who care enough about recovery to help make us aware of our shortcomings. That's a really different take, right? Because normally I'm pissed at people who point out my shortcomings. And so if I could stop when they do that and just think to myself, damn, this is God working through people who give enough of a fuck to go through the uncomfortable, way of life to point this out. Like, because it's not comfortable to tell people about themselves. That fucking sucks. And so really I need to look at that as like, damn, maybe they actually care enough about me that they want to help me. They're willing to walk through that awkwardness.
Yeah, and so interestingly enough, my wife and I we were talking about some of this morning, and we were talking about humility and what that means, and she was kind of describing to me her way of saying, like, we are all equal in all of our assets and all of our liabilities. So I might think that I'm smarter than someone else, but really we're all like equally smart. And of course I balked at that, and we started kind of going back and forth about some of that.
If you were as smart as me, you'd know that's not true.
Yeah, right. but it opened up a different sort of line of thinking in my head about that kind of stuff. Like, it's so easy for me to put these judgments on where I think different people fit with, you know, even their assets and their liabilities,
Right.
you know, and to be like, no, we're all equally. And her description, I get what she was going for. Like, she said, all right, so maybe I'm intellectually smart, maybe I've read a couple of more books, or, you know, worked the steps a little more, but this person may, you know, deeply or intricately know about, you know, 1950s gospel music or some other, you know,
Ooh, my favorite
weird random,
Right.
you know, thing that they just know an abundance of information or a deep understanding or knowledge of, that is like, well, I don't think that's relevant, so that doesn't count, you know. And it's easy for me to be like dismissive of what is important now because it doesn't fit my narrative. And that, you know, really, if we look at all these assets and liabilities, like, we're all equal in them. It's just a matter of, you know, which ones we're sort of almost the awareness thing, like what we're almost being aware of. And so in that, you know, she can have conversations maybe with people that she doesn't like or people that are critical of her, and try to listen to what their point is, instead of being dismissive and being like, well, they're just stupid, you know, or they don't know anything about me, you know.
Hugely important. And I, you know, the other part of that God works through people around us that I thought was really relevant, besides the fact of like being more tempered to the criticism that people give us, is the fact that it's hugely crucial to my spiritual work to surround myself with people who I trust and who are also living in a life of recovery. One, if I don't trust the people in my network, along with my sponsor or my close group of friends, if I'm not in a recovery network, right? If I don't trust those people when they have criticism for me or when they tell me about myself, I'm not going to hear it. I'm just going to dismiss it. Like, I'm, you know, fuck him. He's just a jerk anyway, right? So I need to trust them. I also need to interact with them regularly so that they have a clear picture of me. And they've got to be living a life of recovery, right? This is a psychological concept that we are the average of our 5 closest friends, right? If I hang out with people who, you know, deal in the black market and you know, visit massage parlors, not that there's anything wrong with that, but that might not be conducive for the way of life I'm trying to live, and they might not be able to call me out on the defects that are going on in my life. My stuff might seem minimal to their, you know, exploits or whatever you want to call them, sins or defects. My stuff might be like, oh, I just stole a fucking candy bar. Like, at least I'm not doing that crazy shit. So I need to have other people who have what I want. So when they say something to me, I can say, oh, well, I want what they have. Obviously, they're not living that way. Maybe I should take that into consideration.
Yeah, well, and I actually look at a lot of the, or I guess I should say, a bigger struggle for me is looking at criticism that comes from people that don't like me or that don't care about me, because those are the people that I'll dismiss the easiest, and those might be the most honest criticisms that I don't want to hear.
Interesting.
And so, again, just like this morning, you had mentioned, I guess Amanda has a criticism about something I said. Immediately, my defense mechanism goes up to like 11. You know what I mean? And
Right.
like, I want to, you know, start defending what I have to say, defending my point of view, because I don't really know her, and I don't, you know, whereas if it was criticism from you or my wife or one of my other friends, I tend to not dismiss that as quickly. And both are equally as important, you know what I mean? And I think I became aware of that, like, debating with people through Facebook. Like, you just start to see, like, people start criticizing you, and it's like, well, fuck you, I don't care about your opinion of me. And then it's like, well, wait a minute, you know, maybe that is how I come off, and maybe that is important that I look at that. Because if my goal is to try to, you know, sort of get people to be more open-minded, to think more deeply about things, and all I start doing is becoming like this dismissive, sarcastic asshole, then that's not achieving my goal, and all it does is gets me angry, and it gets them angry, and that really doesn't achieve anything. So what's the point?
That's a really interesting point you make there. I mean, people do. They could possibly have the ability to say more honestly what is true about us, like,
right.
if they're not that close. So that's relevant. I think we do need to listen to it all. I know I need. So generally, when that has happened to me, I take what those jerks that I don't know have said, And I bring it back to my trusted people.
Yes.
And I say, hey, I've heard this. Do you see this too? And that's usually where I can open the door for their honest input, right? And so crucial, I can't do this alone, is what I want to get at. And I see people out there who maybe don't have a circle of friends in recovery, or maybe don't have a tight-knit network, or maybe they do have a tight-knit network and it's just not really people worth a whole lot of admiration, honestly. And I'm not saying they're bad people. They're just not really working this right now. And so maybe you want to find a couple of people that are, right, to be around and get more familiar with yourself.
Right.
This is another quote. To work the seventh step, we must get out of the way so that God can do God's work. I thought that. I was like, Billy will question the fuck out of this statement.
Yeah.
Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, that's immediately. I was like, what does that mean?
We must get out of the way so that God can do God's work. I don't know. To me, that just speaks to the whole, I can't remove defects and I'm waiting on some higher power to do that. Not that I'm waiting, doing nothing, but it's not up to me when it happens. So how do you explain that it just takes an amount of time? Like when they say, because that's a lot of the seventh step that I've heard, is that it's up to the higher power when it gets removed. It's not up to me, right? So how do you rectify that, or how does that understanding fit into your belief system of not really believing in that power specifically? That you could do the work, but maybe the defect doesn't get removed. Or do you think you have control over when it gets removed?
So I think that gets into a more, I don't know what you would call it, like neuroscience-y way of looking at things.
Okay.
Of like, when do you think an idea actually changes in your head? You know, let's take a concept that you don't understand about fucking traffic accidents or whatever, you know, two cars hit at a speed. You know, I don't understand that science, but if someone explains it out to me and then all of a sudden I go, oh, I know what that means now, and now every time I see a traffic accident I can, you know, sort of work through these concepts. I don't know when that idea happens, but when that idea changes or forms in my head, is that a miracle or is that a result of work? I guess. So for me, I guess it would be, you know, I need the consistent input of, like you talked about, like a network of positive people, a network of people that are trying to live spiritually, a network of people that are really trying to look honestly at some of these concepts that we talk about through the steps: love, faith, humility, surrender, acceptance, you know, hope, all these things, kindness, caring, love. Like, I need people that are really looking deeply at these principles and applying them in their life. And then as I also try to apply them in my life, you know, something in that process changes, you know, and I don't know when that moment happens. If we want to attribute that moment of change within our brain to being God, I mean, I got no problem with that. That's good enough. You know,
Right.
For me, I think it's more of a neuroscience kind of thing, but you know, the concept's still the same. If I go about my day trying to be kind and I say, you know, I'm going to actively try to just look store clerks in the eye and say thank you very much, and have a little bit of intention behind that. In the beginning, that might be like a fake thing almost. It might be like a forced thing. But if I do that over and over and over again, eventually that just becomes a thing that I do, and hopefully the meaning goes with it. I believe that's part of meditation, is similar. Like, I'm trying to almost, you know, correct my way of thinking. I know correct's not the right way of saying that, but I'm trying to change my awareness on a way of thinking. And so if I do that through a simple act like looking a store clerk in the eye and trying to be a little bit more compassionate, saying thank you very much, I appreciate, you know, your service or whatever, like, I think eventually that touches my spirit. You know what I mean? Like, eventually that becomes, you know, not a thing that I'm forced to do, and I almost do it unintentionally after 30 days or 60 days or whatever.
Kind of like the science behind forming a new habit. It makes sense. I guess what I was thinking was, if there was this process of it's just what we do and what we go through, that there would be a set amount of time to that. And, you know, after I'm done this, obviously I have fixed myself, so I have a control over when the defect gets removed. But even in the mental health field, there's not that, right? People come in at different ages, different levels of willingness, different levels of being done with whatever they're tired of being done with. We never know if it's going to take a month or 3 years to hit that point where they're ready to do something different, right? It's really very guessworky, up in the air. So many other factors and inputs, right? And so that
Well,
makes a lot of sense.
and I was just sitting here thinking, and I could look back. I mean, I might be able to find one or find something, but I think back to like character defects that I think that I had when I came in. Do I honestly feel like any of them are just gone and that they just don't exist in my life anymore? Like, no, not at all. So have they really been removed? I mean, I don't know.
True, just to a level.
Yeah, they're removed through my action, I think.
But are they removed in thinking? Is what
Right. I mean, my concept when the guy gives me too much change in the stores, they still keep that shit all the time,
Right. Yeah.
Will that ever go away? I don't know. I don't do it, or...
I wanted to take the goddamn piece that I got from plumbing back for $13. I wanted to sell myself out and get a refund.
How do I want to manipulate and control and get what I want? And
Thank God I didn't. But if it was like $1,000 part, I might sell myself out, but not for $13. Just too cheap.
So I think all these reliefs of these defects are temporary,
just for today,
or as long as I continue to do the work necessary to keep it at bay,
right?
And as soon as I stop doing the work, they slowly, push their way back up to the top.
Right, because it feels good to feel good. It's all about that instant gratification. Another one, just to move us along here. We tried so hard to get it right. We were tired of our shortcomings. We were worn out from trying to manage and control them, and we wanted some relief. Oddly enough, this is precisely the attitude we hope to demonstrate in Step 7, the attitude of humility. We admit defeat, recognize our limitations, and ask for help from the God of our understanding. Not a whole lot to say about that, or maybe not even any of these. I just thought they were really kind of nicely put. Like we do beat our heads against the wall trying to control these defects, right? And we come to a point of, it's that surrender, I think. It's that letting go. It's almost like being so aware of the defect, I just get so tired of seeing it and seeing me act on it and seeing me hurt the people in my life and myself and feel bad that I finally get to a point where I'm like, there's got to be something else. There's got to be a pause moment. There's got to be even if I feel this fucking angry internally, I'm just not going to say anything. I will tape my goddamn mouth shut before I will yell at my kid again. I just can't do it.
And part of that is, I think where that comes from, and this, I'm trying to think of how to explain this to people that aren't addicts. It's like, I get so worried that I'm not going to get what I want, that it's not going to turn out the way I want it to, that things are going to be different than I think they should be, that I will, claw, fight, and scratch, tooth and nail to hang on. Like, this is how I need this to turn out. So this is what I have to do to get it to turn out the way that I need it to turn out. And I have no faith, outside of myself and my limited view, that anything else is going to be good or better. It's like, this is the only way this can and should go. And if it goes any fucking differently, it's going to be a disaster.
I think one of maybe the most universal ways it's a tough one because it's really strikes home with some people, but food and health and exercise, right? That whole tie-in. I think a lot of people not in a program like ours, or both in a program and not in a program, can relate to that idea, right? We come to a point where we're just sick and tired of ourselves not being able to fix our fucking eating habits, right? I'm sick and tired of goddamn not spending the time to make dinner. I'm just getting that fast food because it's so much easier and convenient. I'm sick and tired, and so when New Year's Day rolls around, I got the resolution that I'm going to join a gym, and I do it for 2 fucking months, and then I quit every year. I'm sick and tired. Like, that's a place where people get sick and tired of themselves and try to make that change regularly. They hit that point of surrender. They're so tired of that behavior or the outcomes of that behavior that they finally are willing to do something different. Unfortunately, they see what we see. If you don't continue to stay in that sick and tired place, it creeps back in, right?
Place of humility, yeah.
It's tough. Super tough. Our illusions of uniqueness have been overcome in the process. We know that we are neither more nor less important than anyone else. Understanding that we are not unique is a good indication of humility. This is a fucking thing I still struggle with at times.
I was going to say the same thing.
I love being unique. Like, I remember my buddy told me forever ago, you're one of a kind, Jason, and I was all proud. And he's like, nope, there's a kind like you, and you're fucking one of them. Like, I'm like, fuck you, man. Like, that just hurts. But we're not as unique as we think we are, right? I don't think it's that I'm not a little different from everybody. I am my own unique person, right? But I have there's such a tiny piece of me that's different from so many different people, right? There's people that are very much like me. Kind of like when we started this podcast, I thought you and I were almost exactly alike. I was like, oh my God, we think so much alike on everything. And we don't, obviously. Like, we disagree every week. But it's just so interesting to find that there is so much in common with so many other people.
And I think, I struggle with the use of the word unique there more so than I felt way happier to hear the word importance. So I am not more important. My ideas aren't more valuable. My thinking isn't more special than anyone else's. But I can be unique. I don't think that being unique in and of itself is a bad thing. I joke all the time, and I say I've been to I don't know how many thousands of meetings, and I have never heard my story. I've heard people say, oh, you told my story. And I've had people say that to me. But I've never felt like I have heard my story, because I feel like that's unique to me.
I'm going to pay an actor. I'm going to write down your story and have them share it in a meeting just so we can accomplish this for you.
But I don't think that makes me special. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that makes me different. Difference loose there. But
right.
Yeah, I don't think that makes me,
Well, and I think you're hitting the nail on the head with the word special, is where all my uniqueness led me to think that I was more special than others, right? And I think that's where we attack it from. We need to understand that we are different, but it's not a difference that makes us better than others, right? It's just a difference that makes us us, but it's not really like that. The difference over there in Joe is also great. There's nothing better about it.
It's the unique way in which we live out common principles.
Yeah, there you go. Another one, patience is an essential ingredient of working this step. We may have difficulty with the notion of patience because our addiction accustomed us to instant gratification. And I just thought that was so true for me, man. I struggle with patience at times, and this entire step is 6 was me realizing I have all these defects and wanting to fix them right the fuck now, because that's my whole life. I want to do it now. Really, I want to do it yesterday. God damn it. Why isn't it already done? And so to realize that a lot of 7 is the patience of, hey, I ain't fixing, 30, 40, whatever many years of doing this one way overnight. Like, this ain't going to magically pop in the right way tomorrow. It's going to take time. Like you said, the neuroscience aspect of this, like, it takes time to form new patterns of behavior, new habits to replace old ones.
Yeah, and then again, if I don't consistently keep doing that work, them old ones seem to come back.
Yeah, well, they're ingrained.
Or, all of a sudden a defect has kind of been at bay for a while, so I might, slack up on the work on it because I'm not aware of it, and then all of a sudden, it comes back.
It does come back.
And maybe in a different way. Maybe it's manifesting in a new area of my life or something I didn't have before.
I like knocking on some wood here. Gambling is a way that really has just not ever hit home with me, and I'm not completely sure why. Possibly because of how cheap I am, or whatever it is. Like, I just don't want to spend the money. I don't enjoy it. But I'm always so nervous that because of that, like, what the idea that, like, if I say something enough, it'll, I'll jinx myself, basically. Yeah. I'm always worried that when I say that, I'm like, oh, fuck, that one's down the pike somewhere. I'm going to be gambling on everything. Fuck, I don't want it. Yeah. Another one, in working this step, we move away from intellectualizing the recovery process. Our concern is not to determine exactly how or when our shortcomings will be removed. It's not our job to analyze this step. This step is a spiritual choice, a choice that goes beyond any emotional reaction or conscious act of will. As a guy who intellectualizes every fucking thing in my life first because I don't want to feel it, this hits home to me in that it's not my job to sit here and, like, keep tally. I think it talks about that in our step guide. Like, it's not my job to keep tally of how good a job God's doing of removing my defects of character, right? Like, oh, you're not being quick enough there, God, you fucker, right? Like, it's not for me to do that. It's just to try. Right. That's the goal of this step. Just try.
Yeah, and I think there's a point to, and maybe this is overanalyzing it, but it's like in, maybe say loving my kid instead of less being, as critical of my kid in an area. Like if I'm just looking at results, well, criticizing them might get the outcome that I want, but the principle of love might create a better person, a person that feels better about themselves, that has a better outlook on life, that is, quote unquote healthier than the person that just does what I want them to do. So if I'm just looking at things and measuring outcomes and measuring, these tangible things, it's hard to kind of see the intangibles of spiritual living.
You make a great point, right? Science knows that it's very easy to change a behavior now by smacking the shit out of your kid, right? That works. It's highly effective, right? Harsh punishments, highly effective in changing what they do right this second. Also creates pretty terrible human beings down the line. We can't see the terrible human beings down the line. So we think this way works now. I can see the evidence right in front of me. We can't see the evidence that it's not really so beneficial long term. And so I think that's a really relevant point. Let's just work on sometimes the opposite of the defect.
And that for me is kind of over the years where my faith in higher power or in spiritual living comes in. It's like I just have to trust, or I choose to trust. I don't have to do anything. I choose to trust that spiritual living is going to give me a better outcome than whatever I might see in the here and now.
Nice. And so for the last one I have written down here, we've seen our character defects, our faulty belief systems, and our unhealthy patterns of behavior. We've seen that we need to change, but may not be aware that we've been changing since we first came to NA for help. We walked into our first meeting with a spiritual void. Some essential ray of spiritual light had been cut off. We had lost the ability to love, laugh, and to feel. For so long, people had looked into our eyes and had trouble seeing the human being behind the blank gaze. From our very first meeting, we sensed the love and acceptance of other NA members. We began to come back to life. What we are experiencing is an awakening of the spirit, no less dramatic than it sounds. This awakening has been evident to those around us for quite some time, but the change is now so obvious that we can see it as well. And I just thought that was a really poetic statement. It makes me feel a little sad for a lot of people, and I don't know if people who aren't in NA know this or not, a lot of us don't make it to step 7. Like, it seems to be a thing. Some people never work steps. Some people work 1 through 3, and then 4 is just too much of a mountain to climb. A great deal. I know. So if you've ever been a speaker seeker for a meeting that has to get speakers on the steps, you get to 7. Steps. It's like, oh, fuck, I'm limited. Yeah. Like, who the fuck can share this? And so it's just sad that a lot of people miss out on this process, man. It's incredible. And it's been incredible every time I've gone through it, right? Like the first time through was pretty mind-blowing, but I even thought the second time through, well, this won't be as mind-blowing because I already did it once, and I know. And the fact is, it's still, there's so much left to work on, always. That layers of the onion theory is so true, for me at least.
Yeah, and I think that's what it talks about, in that step. It's like we're never going to be perfect. There's always going to be, work to do on ourselves. I mean, my goal isn't perfection. My goal is to be the best version of myself as I can be here and now.
Right. I think one of the things that I struggled with in step 11, just to bring up right before we end here, God had removed the obsession and compulsion for me to do drugs, right? Which was the most amazing fucking thing that could have ever happened for my life when I got here and I started this process. And I was blown away by it, and I just thought it was such an impossible thing to do. And for me, my higher power removed that, and I was free to live without that. And it was like, holy fuck. No more amazing miracle could have happened in my life. And yet when I got to 6 and 7 and thought, can God remove these defects? I questioned it, right? Like, he's already done and removed the biggest defect possible. And yet here I am. I'm like, well, I don't know. These are personality traits. Can he really handle this? Right. Like, I really doubted the ability of, my higher power for some reason, even though I knew he had done this incredible thing. I don't know if you had that kind of experience, but...
No, I mean, I would say no. I trusted wholly in the process of recovery. You know what I mean? Like I've never looked at like this outside, and maybe part of this is again ego stuff. I think maybe it's almost like the one quote you said. It's like I think I overanalyze shit and intellectualize it, and be like, if I just I guess the faith came as if I just keep doing this work, shit's gonna get better, and it was pretty much had to be that simple.
I gotcha. The other thing that came up, and I think it does talk about this in our step working guide, but I didn't look through that to double check. But the idea that I got nervous that God might over remove my defects, if that makes any sense. Like, so we talk about it. We don't really want them removed. We want them brought back down to their right proportion in life, right? Like, basically, we say pain's a bad thing. But honestly, if you don't feel pain, you're going to die pretty soon in your life because you don't know how to avoid things that are hurting your body, right? This has happened before. Like, to a human, they couldn't feel pain, literally. They had no pain receptors, and they just, like, died early because they couldn't feel it when they grabbed a hot thing on the stove, so they just continued to hurt themselves. So we don't, like, it's good to have a healthy level of jealousy. Like, really, it's not healthy to completely have jealousy gone. And for me, it was an area like lust, right? Where I had lust for all these women outside of my relationship. I was terrified that God would remove lust and I would no longer be lustful towards my partner, and then they would need to seek, things outside of the relationship because I wouldn't want to meet their needs anymore because I just didn't care about sex anymore. It just completely got removed, as if that was even possible. This is my fear, right? A guy who thinks about it too much and I'm scared it won't be there at all. But it's incredible that we can have that worry, like that concern. And it to the point where I'm not so unique. It's mentioned in our guide because obviously some other people had it. That blew my mind.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I secretly think so little of myself. I never thought I could be too good. I don't think that's ever been a thing. My criticism of myself is that, like, you'll never be too good.
That's hilarious. Any other thoughts on step 7? I think we've done it justice.
Yeah.
I hope I can remember any of this shit to share during these meetings this week. So obviously next month we'll be on 8. We'll talk about making our list. That's going to be an interesting conversation for sure. Next week we'll talk about either sponsorship or we're going to have somebody on to talk about another program, which I really enjoy the conversations with people about their programs. So hopefully I can find somebody for that. If not, we'll be doing that in 2 weeks, I really hope. And sponsorship, I'm excited to do that too, honestly. So either way, I'm pretty pumped for next week, however it plays out. And
if there's anybody out there interested in talking about other programs, and they don't even have to be specifically, addiction, can be Al-Anon or, adult children of alcoholics or OA or gambling anon, whatever, any of those other fellowships that aren't specifically about drugs,
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great to have more exposure for people, right? I think, I ended up seeking out some other fellowships. It was hugely beneficial for me, but I just think just knowing that it's out there, like that other people struggle in ways that we also struggle, and maybe we can find some help there, or maybe it's right for us. And there's a fear of going to check that kind of stuff out, right? Like, oh my God, I'm going to walk into a sex addict meeting? That's all the perverts are, right? Like, but maybe if you hear more about it, it might identify with you and you might be able to get some help for it. So yeah, absolutely. If you feel like you can represent and know a lot about a fellowship, please feel free to contact us, reach out. Also, if you have any thoughts about the 7th step, as usual, go ahead, find us on Facebook or wherever else we are, Instagram, Twitter. Look us up, email us, do whatever the hell you want. And stay safe out there, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, have a good week.
All right, not bad. Shorter than last week, thank God. A little much. Cool. Oh, I liked it. I thought that was a great step. It was a good 7-step discussion.
And it's funny because I felt like you kept saying, "Oh, I can't wait to hear it." I was putting all this like pressure on myself, like, "Oh shit, I gotta." And then I read all the stuff, and I'm like, "This is all shit." Like, I mean, I try to live this shit. I try not to be one of those people that just says a bunch of good shit and then goes about their life. So
it's super funny to me because in reading the basic text and It Works Out Why, in both of them, like half of the writing was oh my God, let Billy explain this one without a God, right? And the other half was, well, this is exactly what Billy's talking about. I was like, what the fuck? We wrote this half and